Let's go on the record of the matter, State versus Grist, case 241101170. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, apparently some of you had problems with your audio yesterday and never told anybody. And now I'm finding out about it for the first time today, which is causing us some problems that we've got to work through right now. So I'm going to reread to everybody some information. It's called the information. And information are allegations or charges brought against the defendant. They are not evidence of anything. They're simply allegations. After I've read to you the information, each party, the state with Mr. Watabe and Mr. Facemire for the defense, are going to identify the key parties on their team and any potential witnesses that may call. Pay attention to those names. After they've completed doing that, I'm going to ask each of you to raise your hand if and only if you think you know anything about the case, and or if you think you may know somebody that's been identified or that works in these offices. If that's the case, then you'll get to come back and chat with me in chambers about this. All right, I'm going to read to you the information. In the 4th Judicial District Court, Utah County, State of Utah plaintiff versus Tracey Marie Grist, defendant. Case number 241100884. The State of Utah, through the Utah County Attorney's Office, charges the defendant with the commission of the following offense. Count 1, murder, domestic violence. Count 2, conspiracy to commit murder, domestic violence. Count 3, obstruction of justice in a criminal investigation or proceedings. Count 4, commission of domestic violence in the presence of a child. Count 5, commission of domestic violence in the presence of a child. That's been sworn to by the Utah County Attorney's Office. Mr. Watabe, if you please identify your team and potential witnesses.
Thank you. My name is James Watabe. I'm with the Utah County Attorney's Office. On my right, we have Amy Salani, we have Patty Rodriguez, and I have co-counsel Adam Pomeroy and David Brown. Jeff Gray is the Utah County Attorney, and his chiefs are Chad Gruvander and Chris Ballard. People that are involved in this case that you may hear about or potential witnesses include from American Police Department, Detective Broughton, Detective Nakosha, Detective Nordine, Detective Letton, Officer Guerra, Officer Laycock, Officer Stimson, Officer Neal, Officer Waite, Officer Lunt. Officer Stimson is now with HSI. Officer Lunt is now with Spanish Fork. From the crime lab in the Office of Medical Examiner, we have Dr. Amanda Ho, toxicologist Janelle Wright, toxicologist Rachel Kelly Little. We have from the crime lab DNA experts Rachel Williams, Emily Simic. Potentially, you could also hear from Justin Seitsinger, Patrick Sapoli, from SBI, Sergeant Palmina. Some of the civilian witnesses that you will hear from: Brett Laney, Caitlin Laney, David Kruger, Diane Restelli, Mark Restelli, the deceased is Matt Restelli, Kevin Ellis, Catherine Restelli, Tim Ellis, Rachel Jorgensen, and Carolyn Fish.
Thank you. Mr. Facemire.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Dana Facemire. I'm the attorney for Tracey Grist, who is my client here today. And our witnesses are essentially the same witnesses that the state has called. A lot of the last names you heard were family members. And in my office is Randy Lish and Raquel Kenton.
Thank you, Mr. Facemire. All right, now that I've read to everybody the information, if you heard the key players in this case, does anybody know anything about this case or think you know anything about it? So raise your hand. All right, the record reflects nobody has raised their hand. Then the next question is, do any of you think you may know any of the key parties, witnesses, attorneys, or anybody in their firm or offices? Please raise your hand. Excellent. All right, thank you. All right, counsel, anything else you want to put on the record?
No.
All right, let's hand out the jury instructions. Ready for the handout?
And nothing from defense here.
Nothing to think, Mr. Facemire. So ladies and gentlemen, we're now handing out to you what are called jury instructions. These are the opening instructions in the case that'll help you as you listen to the testimony, know how to process it. After I give you the opening instructions, the state will give you an opening statement. After that, the defense will decide whether they're going to give you an opening statement, whether they're going to waive it, or they're going to defer. You're welcome to read along or just listen. You can take these instructions with you back into the jury room. Please don't take them home with you, but leave them where you're sitting on the table each night when you leave to go home. I'll now read the opening instructions.
Judge, one moment. I need one moment.
Need one more. All right, instruction number 1, introduction. Members of the jury, you have been selected and sworn as the jury in this case. The defendant is accused of committing one or more crimes. You will decide if the defendant is guilty or not guilty. I will give you some instructions now and some later. You are required to consider and follow all my instructions. Keep an open mind throughout the trial. At the end of the trial, you will discuss the evidence and reach a verdict. You took an oath to well and truly try the issues pending between the parties and to render a true and just verdict. The oath is your promise to do your duty as a member of the jury. Be alert, pay attention, follow my instructions. Instruction number 2. This is a criminal action brought by the state of Utah against the defendant in which she is accused of committing the following crimes. Count 1, murder, domestic violence. Count 2, conspiracy to commit murder, domestic violence. Count 3, obstruction of justice. Count 4, commission of domestic violence in the presence of a child. Count 5, commission of domestic violence in the presence of a child. The fact that the defendant has been accused of these crimes is not evidence of anything. Rather, the defendant is presumed innocent. The defendant has entered pleas of not guilty and denies committing these crimes. Every crime has component parts called elements. Before you can find the defendant guilty of a particular crime, you must find that the prosecution has proven each element of that crime beyond a reasonable doubt. Until then, you must presume that the defendant is not guilty. The defendant does not have to prove anything. She does not have to testify, call witnesses, or present evidence. Number 3, proof beyond a reasonable doubt. The prosecution has the burden of proving the defendant guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Some of you may have served as jurors in civil cases where you are told that it is only necessary to prove that a fact is more likely true than not true. In criminal cases, the prosecution's proof must be more powerful than that. It must be beyond a reasonable doubt. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt is proof that leaves you firmly convinced of the defendant's guilt. There are very few things in this world that we know with absolute certainty, and in criminal cases, the law does not require proof that overcomes every possible doubt. If, based on your consideration of the evidence, you are firmly convinced that the defendant is guilty of the crime charged, you must find her guilty. If, on the other hand, you think there's a real possibility that she is not guilty, you must give her the benefit of the doubt and find her not guilty. Number 4, presumption of innocence. Remember, the fact that the defendant is charged with the crime is not evidence of guilt. The law presumes that the defendant is not guilty of the crime charged. This presumption persists unless the prosecution's evidence convinces you beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty. Number 5, role of judge, jury, and lawyers. All of us, judge, jury, and lawyers, are officers of the court and have different roles during the trial. As the judge, I will supervise the trial, decide legal issues, and instruct you on the law. As the jury, you must follow the law as you weigh the evidence and decide the factual issues. Factual issues relate to what did or did not happen in this case. The lawyers will present evidence and try to persuade you to decide the case in one way or the other. Neither the lawyers nor I decide the case. That is your role. Do not be influenced by what you think our opinions might be. Make your decisions based on the law given in my instructions and on the evidence presented in court. Number 6, evidence. As jurors, you will decide whether the defendant is guilty or not guilty. You must base your decision only on the evidence. Evidence usually consists of the testimony and exhibits presented at trial. Testimony is what witnesses say under oath. Exhibits are things like documents, photographs, or other physical objects. The fact that the defendant has been accused of a crime and brought to trial is not evidence. What the lawyers say is not evidence. For example, their opening statements and closing arguments are not evidence. Number 7, objections. Rules govern what evidence may be presented to you. On the basis of these rules, the lawyers may object to proposed evidence. If they do, I will rule in one of 2 ways. If I sustain the objection, the proposed evidence will not be allowed. If I overrule the objection, the evidence will be allowed. Do not evaluate the evidence on the basis of whether objections are made. Number 8, order of the trial. I will now explain how the trial will unfold. The prosecution will give its opening statement. An opening statement gives an overview of the case from one point of view and summarizes what the lawyer thinks the evidence will show. Defense counsel may choose to make an opening statement right after the prosecutor, or wait until after all the prosecution's evidence has been presented, or not make one at all. You will then hear the prosecution's evidence. Evidence is usually presented by calling and questioning witnesses. What they say is called testimony. A witness is questioned first by the lawyer who called that witness and then by the opposing lawyer. Consider all testimony, whether from direct or cross-examination, regardless of who calls the witness. After the prosecution has presented all of its evidence, the defendant may present evidence, though the defendant has no duty to do so. If the defendant does present evidence, the prosecution may then present additional evidence. After both sides have presented all their evidence, I'll give you final instructions on the law you must follow in reaching a verdict. You will then hear closing arguments from the lawyers. The prosecutor will speak first, followed by the defense counsel. Then the prosecutor speaks last because the government has the burden of proof. Finally, you will deliberate in the jury room. You may take your notes with you. You will discuss the case and reach a verdict. Number 9, conduct of jurors and rules applicable to recesses. From time to time, I'll call a recess. It may be for a few minutes or longer. During recesses, do not talk about this case with anyone, not family, not friends, not even each other. Until the trial is over, do not mingle or talk with the lawyers, parties, witnesses, or anyone else connected with the case. Court clerks or bailiffs can answer general questions such as the length of breaks or the location of restrooms, but they cannot comment about the case or anyone involved. The goal is to avoid the impression that anyone is trying to influence you improperly. If people involved in the case seem to ignore you outside of court, they're just following this instruction. Until the trial is over, do not read or listen to any news reports about this case. Do not do any research or visit any locations related to this case. If you observe anything that seems to violate this instruction, report it immediately to a clerk or bailiff. Number 10, further admonition about electronic devices. Jurors have caused serious problems during trials by using computer and electronic communication technology. You may be tempted to use these devices to investigate the case or to share your thoughts about the trial with others. However, you must not use any of these electronic devices while you're serving as a juror. You violate your oath as a juror if you conduct your own investigations or communicate about this trial with others, and you may face serious consequences if you do. Let me be clear. Do not Google the parties, witnesses, issues, or counsel. Do not tweet or text about the trial. Do not use Blackberries or iPhones to gather or send information on the case. Do not post updates about the trial on Facebook pages. Do not use Wikipedia or other internet information sources, etc. Even using something as seemingly innocent as Google Maps can result in a mistrial. Please understand that the rules of evidence and procedure have developed over hundreds of years in order to ensure the fair resolution of disputes. The fairness of the entire system depends on you reaching your decisions based on evidence presented to you in court, and not on other sources of information. Post-trial investigations can occur. If improper activities are discovered at any time, they will be brought to my attention, and the entire case might have to be retried at substantial cost. Number 11, note-taking. Feel free to take notes during the trial to help you remember the evidence, but do not let note-taking distract you. Your notes are not evidence and may be incomplete. That concludes the opening instructions. Mr. Brown, I'll turn the time over to you for the state's opening statement.
Thank you. Testing. There we go. Testing. Can you allow us to present? On the morning of July 12th, 2024, Matthew Restelli woke up in his home outside of Temecula, California. He woke up in a great mood because the day earlier, he had convinced his wife, Catherine, who goes by Kate Restelli, to come home. You see, 3 weeks earlier, she had taken their 2 children, Cheyenne and Steele, and left the home in California and driven to her mother's house in American Fork, Utah. Her mother is Tracey Grist. He had made arrangements. He had arranged a rental car for her to drive home. He had put money into her, by her I mean Kate, into Kate's account so she could finance the trip to come home. Little did he know that that agreement to come home was a ruse. She had no intention of coming home. Over the course of the morning of the 12th, Matthew learned from Kate that she couldn't rent the rental car that he had arranged for her. So she couldn't come home. Thinking she still wanted to come home, he went to work. He put new tires on the family truck. He obtained a travel permit so he wouldn't get pulled over. He replaced the starter in the car. And by approximately lunchtime on the 12th, he began the 12 to 10-hour trip to American Fork, Utah. Over the course of that drive, he spoke to Kate several times. We know this because there were several calls recovered from Kate's phone that you will hear. You hear the content of those calls. Because of the content of the calls, it likely wasn't a surprise to Matt that when he showed up at 10:06 p.m. to Tracey Grist's home, that the interior lights were off, that the door was unlocked, and that there was nobody there. He entered the home as he had been instructed to do, took off his shoes at the entryway, or his sandals, and within mere moments of stepping into that home and removing his sandals, he was shot 7 times by his brother-in-law, Kevin Ellis. And he died at the foot of the stairs while Kate and the 2 children were upstairs. Now, the events of what happened that day and the weeks leading up to it is what brings you here today. The judge just read to you the charges that Miss Tracey Grist faces, namely the murder of Matthew Restelli, conspiring to commit that murder, and the obstruction of justice. As you listen to, it's the state's job and burden to prove that she committed each of those crimes beyond a reasonable doubt. That's a burden that we willingly bear. Your job is to pay attention. Take notes. Take notes to the evidence that you will receive. All evidence is going to come to you through this jury stand. Through witnesses, through exhibits, digital, forensic evidence. It will all come to you through that stand. And as you listen to this, I want you to consider the following questions. Did Tracy's actions lead to the death of Matthew Restelli? Did she reach an agreement with her daughter Kate or Catherine Restelli and her son Kevin Ellis that Matthew would be killed? And did she did she take actions that prevented the investigation or prosecution of what happened that night? As you're thinking about that, I want to kind of put in your minds an instruction that you'll receive at the end. So just like you received instructions here, you'll get another packet at the end that contains all the law that you need. One of those instructions is going to discuss the party to the offense. Someone is a party to the offense if they aid, encourage, solicit, or participate another to commit a crime, and that crime happens. So keep that in mind as you're listening to the evidence. Over the next several minutes, I'm going to give you an overview of how I expect that the state's evidence will answer each of those questions in the affirmative. Now, remember, what I say in this opening is not evidence. It's just a roadmap. Okay? It's not going to include everything that you're going to hear, but it is the state's expectation of how the evidence is going to play forward coming from that stand. The relationship between Kate, actually this may be helpful to you. I'm going to refer to a lot of the people on this, and so it'll be helpful for you to refer to this and say, okay, that's where this person fits in. Trust, you will hear this evidence again. This is just a roadmap. In January 2024, the relationship between Matt, the deceased, and Catherine, or Kate, his wife, had become very strained. The couple argued frequently. They argued about Kate's infidelity. They argued about their dire financial situation. But either way, it was bad. In January, the date's in the bottom right corner, Kate reached out to her mom, saying, at this point, I don't know if Matt will be going to Disney. We've been fighting so much. I want out. To which Tracey Grist responds, just say what you need to. And then, I just told your husband, don't mess with my child. I want you to know I mean that. And then a little bit later, I'll just drive 9 hours and strangle him. Appeared to be mere hyperbole at the time. Things improved enough that in February of 2024, they did go to Disney. Matt joined the entire Grist family as they went on a Disney trip. You will hear that the family procured several Apple AirTags to place on the children so that they wouldn't lose them in Disney. By May of 2024, things had deteriorated again. Kate tells her mom, I hate my life, Mom. I hate that I have kids with Matt. Similar concerns were relayed by Kate to her sister, Carolyn Fisher, who you will hear also lives in California. In June of 2024, Kate tells Carolyn Fisher, I hate him. How do I get out? To which Carolyn responded, do it one step at a time. Talk to Mom, Tracey Grist, about a storage unit. So that's what she did. Kate procured a storage unit, began to slowly move things out of the family home that she wanted to keep when she left. You'll hear that the plan was for her to leave at the conclusion of a Las Vegas trip that she and Matt were going to take in mid-June. Diane Restelli is Matt's mom. She's here in the courtroom today. You're going to hear from her. She knew about the dire financial situation that Kate and Matt were in. And knowing that now was not the time for a Vegas trip with their situation, she canceled the trip. This forced a shift or a change in the plan for Kate and Tracy. Tracy obtained a credit card and sent it to Kate, a credit card that Matt couldn't track and didn't know about. On the 18th of June, she arranged for a rental car for Kate and the kids and scheduled it for the 20th. On the morning of the 20th, on the 16th, you also start to see lengthy conversations between Tracey Grist Carolyn Fisher, Rachel Jorgensen, and Kate. A lot of activity. You're going to see that come forward. During those conversations, on the 16th, Tracey Grist's web search history shows that she searched, first, Utah gun law registration, and second, Utah shoot break-in. She also started looking about establishing residency in Utah, the divorce procedures. And as I said, 2 days later, she arranges the rental car, which would be set for the morning of the 20th. On the 20th, in the early morning hours, Carolyn Fisher texts Tracey Grist and asks if she can see the AirTag that she had switched the name to truck. Tracy confirms that she'll look. That same day, this is the 20th, Kate is going to meet Carolyn at the storage unit and at the rental car agency. Carolyn tells her, I used the Apple AirTag, use some Gorilla Tape or something else to stick it somewhere in the truck. Okay? Kate, at the bottom, you'll see she expressed some reservations about this. Not sure she wants to do it. But on the 20th, she drives the family truck into town, leaves it at a shopping complex, and decides last minute, actually, you know what, yes, I am going to put the AirTag in there. She places it in a bin of trash on the floorboard of the truck. Picks up the rental car, goes to the storage unit, fills it with whatever she wanted to take, and begins the drive to American Fork. No warning to Matt that she was leaving. That same day, you will see that the family created a Facebook chat that involved Carolyn, Tracey Grist, Rachel Jorgensen, and Kate that allowed them all to monitor the location of the AirTag. And they discussed frequently its location. During Kate's drive on the 20th, Tracey Grist asked Carolyn Fisher to draft a text to send to Matt to explain that this was just a breather. She does that, and Kate sends it as drafted to Matt. Kate arrives to the home of Tracey Grist the evening of the 20th, enters the gated community where Tracy lived, and set up shop in Tracy's home. Over the next several days, Matt gets over his initial anger about Kate picking up and leaving with the kids without warning. Part of this is because he was being led to believe that this was just a breather. This was just a temporary vacation. Tracey Grist, you'll hear, went so far as to call Diane Restelli and tell her the same thing. They just need a breather. They just need some time. The entire time that Matt is being led to believe that this is a breather, the family's monitoring him. By this point, June 26th, Kevin Ellis, who also lived in the home, was given the ability to monitor the AirTag. We see on the 26th, Kate asks him, what day are you coming back? Wondering for Olaf. Olaf is a nickname that they gave to Matt when they wanted to talk about him. Friday, late, he says. Okay, cool. And then he assures her the tag is still active. Really? She asks. He responds on the 26th, if I have to rush back, I can make that happen. Evidence will show that this was never intended to be a breather. Kate was never coming home. She was never bringing the kids back. On the 29th, Tracy, talking to two family members, the family members ask her, how's Matt taking it? Not that you care. She says, I want him to show up. He still thinks it's only for another week. On the 2nd of July, we're now into July of 2024, Tracy asks Terrell Fisher to talk to Kate. Tell her what to say to a lawyer. Kate sets up a consultation with the lawyer. She sets it up for the July 11th in the evening hours, or late afternoon hours. During this time, during that roughly 10-day period between, while waiting for the consultation, Matt's still thinking this is a breather, starts to push for her to come home. And on the 11th, the morning of the 11th, but during that same time that he's pushing her to come home, Kate's having conversations with Tracey Grist. And Tracy started making passing comments about harming Matt. She went so far as to bring Kate into the laundry room and show her a knife that she had in a rubber glove. And Tracy told her, if he comes, either myself or Kevin will shoot him. And we'll put the knife in his hand to make it look like self-defense. On the 11th, contrary to Tracey Grist's desire that Matt come out, Matt tells Kate, I don't want to drive out. And Kate relays the same to her mom. On the morning of the 11th, Matt doesn't want to drive out. So instead, he arranges a rental car at the Enterprise around the corner. Now this is a message that Tracy sent to Kate, telling her what to say to Matt, which she does. So he makes that arrangement. He puts money into her account. Tells her tomorrow, July 12th, Enterprise, pay in person with a debit card. Her response, cool. She's excited. And then $600 into your account. Later that day, Kate has a consultation with the lawyer. This consultation was recorded and sent to Tracey Grist. A friend who knew that she was going to have the consultation on the 11th reaches out to Kate and asks her how it went. She responds, honestly, I'm bucked. She learned in that call, and you'll hear it, divorce is on her terms, staying in Utah with the kids, wasn't in the cards. So that takes us to the 12th. Matt still thinks she's hopping in the rental car. Matt still thinks that she's going to start driving home that day. She continues the ruse. Good morning, getting up, getting moving, excited for today. Now you'll see text messages between her and her mother from the 11th. That was never going to happen. She was going to fake a sprained ankle, or she was going to go ask the rental car agency and pretend that she can't rent the car. He's excited. I'm over the moon. Can't wait to hug and kiss you all. Now, the day of the 12th, you are going to see a lot of digital evidence. A lot of conversations between Tracey Grist, Carolyn Fisher, Rachel Jorgensen, and Kate. I'm only going to go through a couple of those. From Kate's call log, early morning of the 12th, she calls her mom and talks to her for 4 minutes. Immediately after that, she has a phone call with Matt Restelli. Then, around here, she has a conversation with Kate. She's having a text message with her mom saying, it would be more believable if you go to the rental agency and tell them and do it in person. So she does. She talks to Kevin, says, hey, I need to go make my story more believable. Can you watch the kids for me? She does that, comes back, and has another conversation with Matt at 8:55. These next 3 calls with Matt are recorded. They were recovered from Kate's phone. You'll hear them. You'll hear that she tells Matt they won't rent her the car. Matt's still thinking she wants to come home. Starts to talk about options. Cars that he could borrow. Other arrangements. Sending more money so someone else could rent the car. Options. All these are denied. Forcing him to have to drive out. And you'll hear her convince him not to borrow a car, not to get one from anybody else, but to bring the truck that had the AirTag in it. But he's worried. I need a starter. I still need a travel permit. So he makes those arrangements. By 9:15, he calls her and says, I got the permit. I'll go into town, get the starter. Kate immediately texts her mom, he's going to drive out. Tracey Grist says, I'll call you. They do indeed have a call. 11:39 for 5 minutes. At this point, you're going to also hear the next 3 phone calls that were made between Kate and Matt. 11:55, they talk. And at this point, things change. You hear Kate encouraging him, you're going to come in, right? Help me pack? Matt, knowing the relationship with Tracy, kind of tries to push it off. Well, can't you just be ready? Can't we just throw it all in the truck? I won't even turn the car off. I won't even turn the truck off. She insists. And ultimately, he agrees. As the afternoon approaches, the 4 sisters, or the 3 sisters and Tracey Grist, are continuing to have extensive conversations. At 12:48, you'll see a call between Rachel Jorgensen and Kate Restelli. That lasted for about 20 minutes. In the middle of that call, Tracy pops in on a group call for 7 minutes. After this, you see a call between Tracey Grist and Kevin Ellis at 2 p.m. She responds to Kate at 2:07, I am meeting Kevin for sushi. While there, she's continuing to text Kate, and you'll see those eventually. But she also, at 2:13 p.m., while waiting for Kevin to arrive at sushi, searches, this is Tracy, searches the It's Happening meme. Remember the call with Rachel Jorgensen that happened at 12:48. At 2:18, Rachel Jorgensen begins a series of 3 phone calls. The first is to Aurora, France. Aurora lived in Tracey Grist's home with Kevin and Kate. You'll hear that she made arrangements for Aurora to leave the home and come to her house in Ogden that night, despite never having been there before. Five minutes later, immediately after getting off the phone with Aurora, France, she calls Jacob Trujillo, Tracy's son who lived in the home with them, and makes sure that he has plans with friends that night and wouldn't be home. She then immediately calls Tim Ellis, Tracy's other son, who lived about 4 minutes away. Now you'll hear from Tim. Tim will tell you that prior to this date, they had talked about Tim coming over if Matt were to ever come out, to be a peacemaker, keep the peace, because he was friends with Matt. You'll hear him say that at 2:25, on the day of the 12th, he was told not to come over. With the house, you will hear that after sushi, Tracey Grist and Kevin Ellis returned to the home, had a conversation with Kate. They kind of went their separate ways that afternoon in the house, just kind of doing their thing. But what you'll hear is that over that time, several physical arrangements were made, or preparations were made to the home. As you walk into the Grist home, as you enter the home, to your right is a living room. In that living room, there's a fireplace. And directly in front of you, as you walk into the home, is the hallway leading to the stairs. Now, the toys for the children were traditionally kept in front of that fireplace in bins. Pretty messy, as kids typically are. All of those toys were cleaned and removed and placed in the office. As you walk in, there's a couch immediately to your right, a fabric couch. You'll hear that a blanket was placed over the arm of that couch, fully covering the fabric. A mesh screen, a magnetic mesh screen that's typically on the front door, was removed to allow easier access for Matt. And as the night wore on, Kate continued to talk to Matt to make sure he showed up in a good mood. The final call you'll hear from her, or between the two of them, is at 8:13 p.m., less than 2 hours before he arrives, where Kate again tells him, and make sure you're coming in, right? To help me pack? After that call, there's some text messages exchanged, and Kate, or Matt, concerned for the oil dripping from his truck, says, when I get there, we should put cardboard under the truck for oil drips. 8:09, okay, I'll get some ready. And then about 9 o'clock, remember, Tracey Grist lives in a gated community, Kate sends him the gate code. And then a picture of the cardboard that she had laid out for him to park over. You'll hear that Rachel Jorgensen throughout the day was monitoring Matt's location. At 10:01 p.m., she sends a series of 2 text messages to 2 people. One to Tracey Grist saying Orem, followed by keep an eye on Find My, the Apple app. Then, seconds later, to Kevin Ellis, Orem, keep an eye on Find My. Metadata will show that this message was read. At 10:06 p.m., surveillance footage will show Matt Restelli arriving in the truck, parking over the cardboard that had been laid out to him. And the evidence will show that he arrived to a dark house. The interior lights were off. The door was unlocked, as he'd been told that it would be. And so he entered. Took off his sandals at the edge of the tile where the tile meets the carpet. And the evidence will show that in the dark living room to his right was waiting Kevin Ellis with a gun. And he shot Matt in the chest, the side, the right forearm. And as Matt turned from looking at the living room to go down the hallway, he was shot 4 more times in the back. You will hear evidence from the neighbor that they heard these shots at 10:07 p.m. Concerned, they reached out to Tracy. Is everything okay? You'll see that text message at 10:08. Tracy didn't answer. So at 10:09, the neighbor calls 911. You'll hear that call, reporting that 2 minutes earlier, at 10:07, they had heard what sounded like either firecrackers or gunshots. They couldn't be sure, but they didn't think it was fireworks. They thought it was gunshots. 6 minutes after the neighbor calls, 8 minutes after the gunshots are heard, Tracey Grist calls 911 and reports that Matt had been shot. Now, in that 8 minutes, the evidence is going to show that Kevin left the living room, went and placed the gun in the front on the countertop, and that a knife, and that he was overheard to say, "Be careful, he might still be moving." And that a knife, that same knife that was shown to Kate in the laundry room, was placed in his hand. Now, you'll hear 4 pieces of information about this knife that are suspicious. And first, it was placed in his non-dominant hand. Matt's left-handed. The knife was placed in his right hand. Second, the blade of the knife, the sharp part, was facing towards Matt. And the spine was facing away, meaning the grip was backwards. And you'll see images of this. Third, it was the same arm that had been shot in the forearm. through the skin, through the tendons, through the tissue, through the bone. All things required for grip strength. And fourth, you will see evidence that the blood stains are consistent with the arm being moved after his death. Law enforcement was dispatched based on the 10:09 phone call. This becomes important. You'll see that 2 minutes into Tracy's call at 10:15, when she called at 10:15, she's surprised because she hears knocking on the door, because law enforcement had already been dispatched, and they got there. Law enforcement comes in, and at this point, Kevin had resumed his position in the darkened living room to the right. And pay attention to what he says on the body cam when law enforcement walks in. He says something to the effect of, "That guy had a knife and I," before his voice is drowned out by law enforcement. The investigation unfolded. You'll hear the varying stories between what Tracey Grist says happened that night, between what Kate says happened that night, between what Kevin Ellis says happened that night. It will become clear that they did not account for the neighbor hearing the shots at 10:07 and calling law enforcement. The day after the murder, Kate has a phone call, or is supposed to have a phone call with Diane Restelli. You'll hear those phone calls. You'll also see that immediately prior to that call, Tracy told Kate, "Don't say anything. It can be used against Kevin." No details about what happened. But Tracey Grist has two lengthy phone calls with Diane Restelli. Pay attention to what she says happened. Over the course of this trial, you're going to hear from several members of law enforcement. You're going to hear from a DNA expert. You're going to hear from a medical examiner. You're going to hear from a crime scene expert. You're going to hear from several members of the Grist family. You're going to hear from Rachel Jorgensen. You're going to hear from Tim Ellis. You're going to hear from Terrell Fisher. You're also going to hear from Kate Restelli. Now, Kate will be your first witness. She's been transported here from prison. She's in prison because she pled guilty to murdering Matt Restelli, conspiring with Kevin Ellis and Tracey Grist to commit that murder, as well as an additional charge for the discharge of a firearm that resulted in serious bodily injury. Now, to be sure, Kate, in exchange for providing evidence and information to the state, she received a plea deal. A plea deal that will result in her having the eligibility of parole sooner than she otherwise would have. As with all witnesses, your job is to weigh their credibility, okay? And you don't check your common sense at the door. You still know when people are telling the truth, when they're not. You weigh her like everybody else. You can choose to believe all, some, or none of what she says. But note that the vast majority of what she says will be corroborated by digital and physical and forensic evidence. Finally, you will hear that both Kate Restelli and Kevin Ellis tried to talk Tracey Grist out of this, but she wouldn't be persuaded. You will hear that they failed to persuade her to not go through with this, but they also failed to stand up to her. As you can see from this roadmap, there's a lot of evidence. There's a lot of times, there's a lot of dates. The timeline will become clear as you hear it again, but please take notes. You will likely only hear it once from this stand. The evidence that gets displayed here will go back with you for you to be able to review, but please pay attention and take notes. At the end of this, my colleague, Mr. Pomeroy, is going to stand up and give you a closing argument and present to you the additional evidence, present to you the conclusions that should be drawn from this. And after he's done, the state's going to ask you to retire back to chambers and to find that Tracey Grist is guilty of murdering Matt Restelli and conspiring with her son and her daughter to commit that murder, and then of obstructing justice by planting that knife. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Facemire.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my name is Dana Facemire, and thank you for being here today. I know that you've all seen jury trials before, because we all own TVs. So we've seen jury trials, but they're much different. Yesterday, I don't know if you've ever seen that on TV, where judges will ask questions and lawyers will ask questions. Some are personal and some are not personal, you know, some are just, who are you? Is this working? Hello, hello? Yeah. And so, this is how real life trial work is. It's sometimes very planned out, and sometimes things aren't planned out. Sometimes things happen during a trial that no one expects. But today, this case is about a murder. And that's a pretty horrific thing. When I first became a lawyer, I had the chance to get involved in a murder, and I was surprised at the photos I had to view. They're gory, and there will be some here. And I apologize that you have to view them, but as the jurors, that's your responsibility to view and review evidence. However, one thing that you need to know is that almost everything presented to you in this trial, we all have known for a long time. We've been working on this case for a long time. We've had hearings before the judge. We've had hearings where witnesses have taken the stand. We've had pretrial stuff going on. And so all of these text messages and recorded calls and pictures of the crime scene, and we've seen it for a long time. So if you feel like we're a little desensitized from what you're seeing, just know that it's because it's the 50th or 100th time we've seen this stuff. And so our desensitizing of some of these horrific things is just because of repetition. This case, in large sense, is what the opening statement presented. However, I was so confused in the opening statement because I know a lot of what he was saying, but it's still really confusing. And so he asked you to take notes and to keep things together because it is confusing. There's a lot of things that are at play in this case, including things after the murder occurred. This is the family. That's the easiest part of every exhibit in this whole case. This is my client, Tracy. These are her kids. And this is her kid, Kate. And Kate sort of comes in between Kevin and Tim. And she married Matthew. And they have 2 kids. And then Matthew has mom, Diane. That's the easiest exhibit we'll have. Everything else is a little bit hard to see and hard to differentiate. I think the thing that will be most apparent in this case is that as this case moved forward, there became a narrative. This is what happened. This is what happened. This is how it happened, and this is what happened. The problem is their narrative decided the evidence, and they've never left their narrative. They never allowed for the evidence to speak for itself and then determine what really happened. The narrative has continued to press how the evidence is interpreted, is decided. And that's an error. That's an error in police work. You don't let the narrative decide the case. You let the evidence decide the case. Interesting fact about this case is that the murder occurred, and then Kevin was arrested, and then many months later, Kate and Tracy were arrested. And it was because of law enforcement, really the gritty part of work. They went and they started scouring things and looking at things. And they said to themselves, hey, we don't just have Kevin killing a guy. We have this conspiracy between Tracy and Kate. And therefore, we need to arrest them. And they arrested them. What happened in between the actual time of the murder and when they were arrested, we're going to hear about some things there. Then you're also going to hear about some things that happened after they were arrested until finally, many, many months later, after many, many, many hearings later, after witnesses had testified and all of these pictures you've already seen have been shown and things of that nature, Kate decides to enter a plea. And she decides to enter a plea not a year after she's been incarcerated, but a little bit less. So she's known about the evidence in this case. She's known what they're saying against her. She knows what they're arguing, that you're part of the conspiracy. She's talked to her lawyer about it. They've come up with a plea deal. And she has decided this is the best way for me to move forward in this case. And the best way for me to move forward in this case, given everything they have, is for me to enter a plea and come up with as close of a cap of jail time, prison time, that I'm going to serve. And she has that right. You know, very few cases go to trial in criminal work. Very few. The vast, vast majority, almost 90+%, don't go to trial. And Kate's was one of those. Hers didn't go to trial. Kevin's, on the other hand, did go to trial. Kevin's case went to trial a couple months ago. And so the big whodunit is not part of this case. Frankly, we all know who did it. Everybody. We all know Kevin shot Matt. The murder in and of itself is decided. Completely decided. And the state will have an opportunity to show you pictures and show you a medical examination and show you all this stuff and blah, blah, blah. And frankly, Kevin has already been found guilty. Kevin's already been sentenced to prison. And so we'll spend time going over that part of it. But what we're here today is about whether or not my client conspired with Kevin and Kate to kill Matt. And I think as you go through this case, you will say to yourselves, this is the messiest conspiracy I've ever seen. These guys are up and down and sideways and leftways. They sort of sound like a family who doesn't really function great, but they function. Who goes to Disneyland, you'll hear about that. As a whole group, they go to Disneyland. And yet the marriage is on the rocks, marriages is tough. Kate and Matt's marriages is like really, really strenuous. You'll hear Kate testify in just a few minutes. And when she testifies, you will see how her testimony is determined by the narrative already decided. You must plead to conspiracy, Kate. You must plead to conspiracy because we need our other conspirator, Tracy. So we must gravitate the evidence so that we get all of our people, Tracy and Kate. We'll leave Terralyn alone. We won't charge her, even though the officer at one point said, I sort of thought we should have charged her. And Rachel, we'll leave her alone. And the officer said at one hearing before, I sort of think probably should have charged her. Maybe charge the whole family. I don't know what their thought was. But I think what you'll see in this case on July 12, 2024, is that a guy who's coming up from California to see his two kids for the first time in a few weeks, after his wife left him a note, a text, and he's coming up to see him. And you'll actually hear phone recordings between Kate and Matthew about the anxiousness of coming to see each other. You'll hear it. And hours later, he'll be killed. It's a crazy deal. You'll hear about Kate's desire to look at a divorce as an option. Look at a divorce as an option? Like, that is the option. As opposed to murder? I don't know if you know, but people get divorced all the time. I know people divorced. This building knows lots of people divorced. I know people who actually are divorced and share time with kids with the other parent. I know of that. I'm aware of that. I don't know how it ever came to this point. I don't know how this guy right here, Kevin, decided that was not the option, even though he lives in a family of divorce. I don't know how Kate decided that that was an option, even though she lives in a family of divorce, where she communicates with all her family members, including her dad. I don't know why they're arguing Tracy would make that the option, and she has lived in a family of divorce. This is just tragic. It's a tragic story. Beyond belief to me that someone would go to this extent. there's a few things that are gonna come out that you haven't been told yet that will really make the deciding factor on how did this whole plan come together? When did this whole plan come together? And I think you'll just feel like I feel. It's just messy. It's really messy. It's no real plan. It's just a moment of craziness. A moment of craziness. I think that's what you'll find in this case. As we begin with our first witnesses, you'll see how that goes. Take notes. In our opening instructions, which are somewhere here, thank you. There's a few things the judge said, and they keep the instructions with them, don't they, Your Honor? Yeah, you have the instructions. I'll write a few things down. Number 6, it says evidence. A lot of people get confused. A lot of people call my office, hey, Ms. Facemire, I got this case, but I don't have any evidence. I said, what happened? Well, I was outside, and this guy kicked me in the leg, and, I got a bruise, and I guess a bruise is evidence. And then I say to him, well, what's evidence? Is you testifying. That's evidence. That's actually evidence in almost every single case. Testimony. Testimony is evidence. What you hear on the stand is evidence. The problem is when you go to deliberate, you don't get a copy of it anymore. So you can't go back and, can I re-listen to that? That's not available. You need to remember. And as a group, you need to confer and deliberate. That's a legal term, right? So evidence is testimony. So take notes of the things you remember as best you can. No one's perfect. I'm not perfect. But do that. Because those things are really what determines this case. I find an interesting thing, and I'm sort of bothered about this jury instruction. I'll tell you why. It's the jury instruction that says, it's number 3, I think. No, it's number, where is it? Yeah, number 5. Role of judge, jury, and lawyers. You know what my role is. You know what the lawyers' roles are. Our roles are to advocate for our client's position, right? But it says here, all of us, judge, jury, and lawyers, are officers of the court. I had to go to law school. I had to take a bar exam. I had to get sworn in to be an officer of the court. I'm an officer of the court. You guys are an officer of the court because we chose you. You got the easier road, but yet you have to sit through a jury trial. We're all officers of the court here. We're all part of the process. As a judge, he supervises a trial. As a jury, you are what we call fact finders. You determine facts. In the end, your deliberation and your decision determines facts as best as can be. And so because you're the fact finder, no longer is a judge our fact finder. We certainly aren't fact finders. You guys are. And because you're fact finders, what you remember, what you recall, what you write down, what you pay attention to, what you see, you will have to come up with the facts. However, there's a caveat. And that caveat is based on the United States Constitution. In the United States Constitution, we have certain rights and privileges. Bill of Rights, I'm sure you've heard of them. One of those rights is the defendant has no burden of proof. When you're charged with a criminal case, the burden is upon the state. The state has the burden to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. That's the law. There's nothing in the Constitution that says the defendant has to prove anything. Indeed, after a state's case is concluded, the defendant can just say, I'm done. Thanks. Did they do it? Did they prove it? Because that's our constitutional rights here in the United States. And so as you go through your fact-finding part, it's the burden of the state to determine whether or not they prove the case. Lastly, we had a big trial here in Utah not too long ago, and my daughter was all into these trials, and she listens to them. And one day she said to me, Dad, she's older, she's 36. Dad, the defense didn't call a witness. What does that mean? Now, my daughter's known I've been a lawyer pretty much all her life, so surprised she said. I said, honey, on almost every single case you have, all the witnesses are known to everybody. I don't know who the witnesses are. I've known for ages who these witnesses call witnesses that each party is going to take advantage of their opportunity to testify. And so whether I call them as a witness or don't call them as a witness, the fact that they're here and that they're involved in the case is why they're here. So whether the defense calls a witness or doesn't call a witness, it's not because of anything more than we all know who the people, the players, we all know who the players in the game are. All of us. It's not a surprise. So as you listen to this case, don't be surprised that we know these witnesses and we are able to talk to them because we've done it before, and we will, on other cases it will continue that way. I don't know how long exactly this trial is going to take. It's scheduled for 3 weeks, but the evidence will be presented to you over time, and as you go through this process with binders of exhibits, you have an opportunity to what I think you will find. This is just a messy deal that just got out of hand. And one guy murdered a guy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Facemire. Counsel, could I see you up here for a second, please? Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we're going to take a brief break for you to do a restroom break. When you come back in about 10-15 minutes, we're going to call our first witness. We'll go to about noonish, and then we'll take our lunch break, and then come back and do our afternoon session. So right now, let's take a recess for the jury.
All rise for the jury.
Please be seated. We're on the weather. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, both parties have informed the court that they're invoking the exclusionary rule. What the exclusionary rule means is that if you were a witness, unless you're a designated party representative, you're not allowed to listen into the proceedings before the court until after your testimony has been provided and you have been released from your testimony. So if some of you are on WebEx, we may be moving you into a breakout room or completely kicking you off if you're a designated witness. In other words, if you've received a subpoena or been told by one of the attorneys that you should be testifying. If you're in the courtroom, you'll need to leave until you've given your testimony unless the state has you identified as a victim's rep. Our victim's representative for the county attorney's office, you could help us by making sure that people online in the courtroom are not coming in that are witnesses for the state. I think they're the same witnesses, so we'll probably lean upon you if that's possible. With that in mind, let's take about another 10-15 minutes and reconvene between 15-20 after for the first witness. Thank you.
Just for the record, the state would ask the detective Norton to be able to stay as case
Yes.
manager, and then Diane Restelli and Mark Restelli be able to be allowed to stay under.
As the victim's representative. Any objection, Mr. Facemire?
No.
All right, that's fine. Thank you. We're in recess.